back in the Cave of Wonders with the engine. I really should do a proper video on this engine at some point, and I will, but for the moment I'm just introducing the fact that I am stripping it down a little bit further so that I can clean it up and paint the block. There's a few things need to come off: inlet manifold, timing covers. I might remove the timing belt if I can remember how to time it up. Obviously I've removed the flywheel, so that's what you ordinarily use to lock it in position so that you can swap the belt. But as long as I don't move anything, I'm not going to bend any valves or anything, and I can time it up properly afterwards. So I'm going to continue stripping it down, give it a damn good clean, and then paint it with some black enamel engine block paint, which I have purchased. Been stripping this down for a while. Annoyingly, we have an issue with the intake camshaft sprocket. It's actually cracked and bent, so I think this engine, while it's been in storage before I had it, has fallen over. And these are only like, I don't know, I think you call it sintered, or it's like a kind of crappy casting really, and it's just fractured. It's quite a coarse grain structure and it's just popped basically. I've left it in its timed up position. I looked on the internet and basically that's about right, so that'll help me when I come to put it back together again. That can come off now. One of the reasons I need to take all of this timing belt and gears off is because I want to pull the covers off so I can paint it properly, but also to go in my Rover Bubble I need to change that engine mounting. So gonna slacken off the tensioner. I've got a new timing belt kit, so that will go back in again, but yeah, that will all come off now, and then hopefully I'll be ready to start cleaning things up. Made quite a lot of progress with the strip down. None of this is hard, it's just a bit messy and a bit boring. I didn't realise that that main engine bracket was actually a cover for the cooling jacket, so you can actually peer inside, and I'm quite pleased that that is really pretty good. There's no, I mean, it looks like it's always been run with coolant, so I'm not worried about scale build up in any of the waterways internally or anything like that. To look inside the top of the engine, you wouldn't think it had done 80,000 miles. If it has done, then it must have been very well serviced, because ordinarily this sort of inner area of the cam cover and the cam, well, basically the top of the engine, usually it gets stained kind of golden colour, whereas that's still silver, so that's encouraging. I was never intending on removing the head because there's no indication of a head gasket problem or anything, but I've stripped it down so much I might as well. I think a head gasket, a Klinger 4-layer metal one's only about 40 quid, or it might be 80 quid, I can't remember, but I'm going to pull the head off after lunch as well, because that'll give me a look into the bores and the backs of the valves and things that I can't see at the moment, because if I did have a problem I'd be kicking myself that I'd already done it once. With the timing covers and the back covers out of the way, you can see there's quite a lot of oil drainage down here, so I'm going to replace the cam seals as well, and then on the other end there are two plugs, they'll get replaced also. So I should have an oil leak free engine. It will shortly be the moment of truth. What I'm hoping I find is nice clear piston tops, no scoring, no burnt valves, and clean as a whistle inside. We shall see. I'm using my iPhone and I haven't really got a tripod or anything to mount it on, so I shall whip the head off and then show you the results after. Well, straight away I'm pleased I did pull the head, because, and I have found this in other places in the engine, I think where this was stored it had rodents, and when you look in here you can see nuts and things that like a squirrel or something has very kindly left and placed inside the spark plug recesses. But some of that has actually managed to make it down inside the engine. So we have like part of a seed pod, which probably wouldn't have done a lot of damage. It probably would have just got exhausted as soon as the engine was cranked over. A chunk of wood, so that can come out. But I'm very pleased with what the top of this looks like. There's no evidence of debt or heat erosion or anything like that. Piston tops, piston crowns are all nice. The underside of the cylinder head looks good. Just really wants a good clean up. So yeah, really happy with that. Next I will probably, well, I'm in two minds as to whether to pull the oil pump off. I don't really think I need to bother, if I'm honest, and I can't remember how involved it is, so I may not bother. I did want to have a look in the bottom of the engine, in the sump area, because I've got that Ali T16 620 Ti sump to go on. What I didn't realise is that their tin sumps are held on with M6 bolts, whereas the ones in the 620 Ti, they have an Ali sump but with M8 bolts. So that might be a bit of a problem. It will mean I either have to tap out the bottom of my block, which will not be fun because it's steel, or I just use M6 bolts through M8 holes, which is not ideal, but yeah, we'll see. Well, that's taken quite a while, but I have really thoroughly cleaned that block using a combination of old petrol, panel wipe, and an aerosol of brake cleaner. So I'm going to wait for that to go off a little bit more, and then I'm going to go over it with my Dremel tool just to flake off any other bits of rust, then degrease it again, then I can do my enamel painting. Incidentally, I have pulled the oil cover off. I've left the sump on for the moment. I will take that off just before I paint it, but it just stops crap getting in the bottom. Excuse the noise in the background. I've got the football on and I can't be bothered to go and turn the radio down. Anyway, engine enamel time. It says to stir it for 2 minutes, which I've done, and I shall now paint the thing. I'll go the other side because the light is better. Any damp bits you see, they're just panel wipe evaporating off. In fact, that doesn't look too good, does it? Oh well, it's as good as it's gonna get. Hopefully this paints nicely. Looks promising. It suggests doing a couple of coats, so I'm going to do a light coat first, really work it in there, then afterwards I can do a proper finishing coat. Cool. Incidentally, I'm fitting a T28 Turbo, which is the spare of that car. That's an S14 import, so it came with a standard. I thought it was a roller bearing turbo. It's not, it's just a standard GT or T28 turbo. So that's going on the Bubble. The one that's in there now is out of an S15, which is the roller bearing turbo. So it's funny really, they're both 2-litre turbos. This one puts out 200 horsepower standard, that one would have put out 200 horsepower standard, but those SR20s are a lot better at taking more boost on standard stock internals. So this will only be able to go up to like, I don't know, 12 psi or something without blowing apart. That thing, you can get up to 350 horsepower, that's running about 300 at the moment, all on standard internals, and it's a really, really nice drivable car. That is the first coat done. Looks really nice. It's actually very nice paint to use. It doesn't clog up. Well, it isn't some sort of an enamel paint, but it actually paints really nicely. It's going off fairly quickly, but I have to wait half an hour to do the second coat, so I'm going to go have a cup of tea. Oh yeah, it is looking seriously minty now. So that's good. I'm going to wait for the paint to go off, and then rock it on one end and pop the sump off and see what that looks like. Well, while that's curing, I thought I'd look at the inlet manifold. This is the lower part with the inlet tracts, and you can see there's a lot of loveliness in there. Just crude casting really. So while I have it off the car, I'm going to tickle it a bit with a die grinder bit. Try and get that in focus, basically just to take off some of those burrs. It'll make chuff all difference really, but I don't know, all helps a little bit, plus it makes me feel good. So they have all had a bit of a tickle just to get the worst of the flash lines off the inside. Some of them are recesses, so unless I really ground into it, I wouldn't get them out, so I haven't bothered. As I say, it's probably going to make chuffle difference. It's just a nice thing to do if you got the tools and the time to do it. It's quite satisfying, but imperative that I now get all of that swarf out of there, so I'm going to go and blast the hell out of it with high pressure hose. Got the second coat of enamel going off, so thought I'd turn my attention to the cylinder head and a couple of other bits and pieces that I just happen to have knocking about, which I've cleaned up with a wire drill on the brush. On these you have to take the camshafts out, obviously, to get to the valves in order to take the valves out properly to clean them up. I've shortcutted that whole process because I didn't want to take the cam carrier off the cylinder head proper, because I didn't really need to disturb anything because it will look so clean. But anyway, to clean up the combustion chambers, I left the old gasket in there and then just very delicately used the high-speed steel drill just to clean off the tops of the valves. I didn't want to damage the aluminium or drop anything in there, so I've really not done an amazing super clean job. You can still see the exhaust valves have got crap on them, but that's just how they're going to stay. They are, well, the whole combustion chambers are actually really nice. I'm really happy with this engine. Bought for 150 quid, it should be a really good one. So yeah, cleaned up without going mega silly, and then with that out the way, I'll just clean the rest of this goop off with a razor blade, probably just before I put the engine together, because I'll only have to do it twice. I think that's about all I'm going to do today. I've just balanced the head on the block and the lower inlet, really just because it's a good way of keeping it all safe and dust free inside. I'll tape those over a little bit as well. In fact, I might as well take that off. Will it go on upside down? No, it won't. Yeah, I'll just leave that off for the moment. So yeah, I'm not going to do anything more on the engine today. I still haven't really looked at that sump area, but next time I come back I'll do that. Welcome back to the car, and hopefully an all too more productive series of videos. I've got the subframe back in, that's all torqued up and fitted with thread lock. I've removed the brake servo, and that is over yonder. Having painted it satin black. Then what I've done is just put back in all of the blanking plugs and rerouted all the cables properly. And this is the bulkhead insulation panel that would have been on there originally, and it's really had it. You can't buy them new, and there's no one in a breaker's yard who's going to want to take one off for you because it's such a ball ache to get to. Also, this has quite a lot of padding along the bottom, which when you offer this up to the car, doesn't actually go behind that engine mount. It's too close. So basically that's scrap and won't be going back in. So I've bought myself some sticky back plastic heat reflective sound deadening stuff. So I'm going to use that as a template, work out where I need holes, and then chop it to size, double check everything, and then fit it. All in, looking good. There's quite a few holes in the original bulkhead insulation which I don't actually need. So I've marked where some of them are, but I haven't punched them through yet because I'm pretty sure I won't need them. Some of them are for the brake line brackets and things, others are for little catches and bracketry to hold the insulation on, but because this is sticky back plastic, it doesn't need those. I am going to put the servo on once the paint is dried. Then I'm also now going to fit the power steering rack. I think in previous videos I had discussed the differences between the racks. So that is the original Rover 200 rack, and that was the same regardless of model, as long as it was power steering. and right-hand drive throughout the 200 range, certainly the Mark IIIs, or that is what I'm led to believe, and I haven't really found anything to contradict that yet. Apart from, that is the BRM rack, which is that one there, which I'll come on to in a minute. Originally, I had wanted to fit the whole ZR subframe with the ZR rack because it's a lot faster geared. So for each sort of degree increment in the steering wheel, you get a larger extension of the actual rods. So faster, nimbler steering. The other benefit is that this kind of rack with the gears under the body of the rack can suffer from some sort of shake. I've never had it in any of the ones I had, but apparently they do. So that was what the advantage of this one is, because the gears are on top of the rack body, and apparently that helps in some way. I'm not actually sure why. You'd need to talk to a proper steering engineer. Anyway, over here we have a 200 BRM rack. So it's the same body as the standard 200 rack, meaning it will fit in my subframe, but it is faster geared. So it's not as quick as the ZR rack, but it is an improvement over that one. So for me, it's the perfect compromise. The additional benefit is that it comes with power steering pipes, and actually that union end fits my power steering pump, which the modified Pertec cable that came on the ZR rack, which should have fitted, didn't. So hopefully that will all go in and fit nicely. A couple of things to do before it goes in. Just want to give it a good clean. The gaiters, I've already had a look at them, and they're absolutely spot on. And the rod ends, unbelievably, the little boots are fine. This one is a little bit free. Usually that would be stiff to turn on a new rod end, but there's actually no play in it. This mounting bush rubber thing has had it, but I've got a brand new one to go in. The actual rack rubbers are really good, so I'm happy with all of that. I'm just going to clean it up with a wire brush and then fit it to the car with a new bush. Okay, rack cleaned up. Those gaiters, interestingly, I don't know, probably not interesting, but they're not like the old rubbery type ones. They're actually hard plastic, so that's why they've survived a bit better, I think. The rack rod ends are stamped TRW, so I think they're the original Rover ones, which is pretty unusual to still have on them. So maybe this car did low miles, which is well, I don't know, I'm kind of guessing really. Anyway, that is the new cushion end support rubber for here. So I can pick that one off, put that one on, put the whole lot in the car. The one thing I will have to be mindful of is centering the rack. So what I'm going to do is turn this all the way one way, all the way the other way, count the turns, turn it halfway back, and then some racks have a little way of pinning them. I haven't had a look yet, but there might be a little access hole, and I want that to stay in position with the steering wheel in the car locked in the straight ahead position. Then when I offer up the UJs and everything, the rod, or the body should be in the right place with the rack and everything, and I won't have to fanny around too much. Because if you fit this wrong, the valves could always be sort of half loaded or something. So that's what I'm going to do next. Well, that has been a tremendous fiddle, and we're not there yet. Just trying to get the rack into the subframe without having to take the rod ends off and the track rods off. I knew it must be possible because the guy who sent the rack had obviously managed to do it. So it was a bit of a wiggle. That's now in there. Unfortunately, because I had to cycle the rack left and right in order to feed it through the subframe, I've now got to recenter it again. But that reminded me that there is a little rubber grommet thing that sits on top of there once that has poked through the subframe. So I've just put that in from the top. Going to centre the rack again, then post it all up through the hole and hopefully reunite it with the steering column. Okay, I realise filming conditions aren't the best in here because of the bright light coming through the windscreen and crap on the lens, but the rack is in and connected, and now I can go one whole turn to the left, half a turn, then a little less than 45 degrees, it's all the way to the left, then one whole turn to the right, half a turn, and a little bit less than 45 degrees. So I know that the steering wheel and the column and the rack are all centered, and that's important because power steering, I don't want the valves in the body to be part loaded. Oh, excuse me. Oh my god, it's hot in there. What I was doing was, even when I was cycling the rack backwards and forwards with the mold grips before I installed it, it got moved again as I was wrestling it up into position. So I was actually disconnecting the column and moving it a spline at a time on the UJ until I got it perfect, which is quite time consuming and laborious. And even though I'm in the shade, it's very hot and sweaty in there, so I'm now dripping in sweat. But I'm done for today. I'm going to have a brief tidy up. I haven't really done a lot, but I only had a couple of hours. But yeah, it's all looking kind of sensible. I haven't worked out where that pipe goes yet. I think the other one comes up through here, but I'll worry about that later. Righty ho, repainted the servo. Didn't actually need a lot of work. I just rubbed it down, painted it once in satin, then realised the paint was reacting, but actually that ended up being okay. Rubbed it all down, painted it again, it's in. I now need to just climb inside the car and do the impossible, which is get the nuts back on and do the nuts up, but it's right up underneath in there and it's actually quite tricky to get to. Welcome to the footwell. This, I'm sure many of you will have experienced much the same thing now. The impossibility of getting nuts and bolts back together in areas where there's next to no access. I've got the bottom two on, the other ones are up above that bracket, and they're being a little bit of a pain to try and get onto. I don't think I'm going to quite have to resort to super gluing nuts to my fingers and then tearing my skin off once I've got them started, which I've had to do previously. But it is a slow and irritating, wriggly, fiddly process, so I'm going to persevere and hopefully I can get them on and done up. Grr. Well, that really was a monumental ball ache. I had to get it upside down, but I didn't actually have to resort to the super glue trick. Now I just need to get the clevis pin back in, and then these clips which hold a protective plastic cover over where the column goes through the bulkhead. Right, I don't know whether I can actually film this, but how neat is that? That plastic conduit cover goes all the way over the steering column and means that you cannot mash your big toe into the UJ, which is something that I've noticed a lot of French cars don't seem to have. I remember driving my ex-girlfriend's Peugeot 206 when they first came out, and you could rub your big toe in the UJ and feel the column turning between your feet as you drove the thing. So yeah, just a nice bit of quality in a little car to keep that covered and out of the way. With the rack in place, I've been mocking up where the power steering lines run and go and what they should be doing. That's the original standard reservoir. This pipe here came with my BRM rack, and other photographs online show that that is the one that most people are using. It goes down here. But then we have a bit of a problem. I've fed it through the back of the subframe and it'll just about go in the rack, but it really isn't happy. All the cars I've seen factory, I think the pipe comes down the front. I'm not 100% sure. This is, that's the low pressure return from the rack. You'd have the low pressure outlet from the reservoir going into the pump, which will be about here. Then the high pressure outlet from the pump, which will go into the rack, which is going to be this pipe here. However, that doesn't want to fit either. Although that union end fits in my pump, it ain't going to be long enough and it isn't going to be the right shape. So all in all, I'm going to be left head scratching at the moment because I really need my pump and engine in there so I can work out what goes where and how to route it all. But it might be that this being the low pressure one, I'll cut and then extend that all the way around and go back in again. The high pressure one, I don't know. I might have to make something out of Goodrich hose with the correct union ends on it, but with a swaging tool to crush it. Crush the union ends on properly. I don't know, we'll get there. But anyway, I'm giving up on power steering for the moment, and now I'm going to turn my attention to refitting the scuttle panel cover, because all of that was taken off because the windscreen came out to paint the car. I've now covered it in dinitrile, but I need to put the motor back in, reattach everything, and make sure it works. Back to my painting rack. That's the motor, masked off, sanded back. That's the bracket for the windscreen wiper motor as well, and this is my paint rack, which I think is meant for growing runner beans, but it does equally well for painting stuff because it happens to be facing towards the sun. Those of you who watch this channel, well, it's not really a channel, it's just my doing videos. Barney Bunny is down there watching me quite menacingly. I think he's wanting some apple, so I might have to go and get some in a minute. Okay, that's all drying. Wedged that down there. Again, I had a bit of a fail with the paint. I forgot that tough paint enamel just doesn't work. It's varnish basically, so I used some satin instead. Let's go and see if we can feed the rabbit. Barney! He's definitely a wild rabbit. Someone suggested he might be a pet that's escaped. He definitely isn't. He's definitely a wild rabbit. Barney! But he does like apple, and he does like carrots. Come on. Come on, Barney. Usually. Come on. Come on. Come on, apple. Come on. This might take a while. Come on. Barney. Come on. Off he goes. There's quite a few rabbits around here, but he's the only one that will come and take food from your hand. Most of the other ones just leg it. He loves apple. He quite likes carrot. He's alright on cauliflower. Goddamn loves sweet corn, but yeah, we don't give him much of that because I like it too. Refitted the wiper motor with some rather fetching stainless cap head bolts. Got new stainless screws in all the way along. Then I've bought these, which are new little plugs to cover the screws. Got them off eBay. And I think they're rapid prototype ones. So somebody's obviously taken a scan of an original and then machined, or printed these up. So we shall see how they fit. I can one-handed get one out of the packet. Looks like I can. They go down there, and hopefully we'll hear a resounding, reassuring click. Ah, okay, that is good. Wasn't sure they were going to work, but yeah, apparently they do. Right, good. Well, that's the end of this video. Just going to fit them in then. Call it a day. See you later.